Welcome back to the 626 Productions. I guess now we can call this a legitimate podcast. We're somewhat getting on a regular basis. Happy New Year's, Pat. We are finally at the end of 2024.
Yeah, happy New Year to you as well, TJ. Like you said, final day of 2024 here. Hopefully, 2025 continues to treat us well in terms of sports entertainment.
Yeah. I mean, this year, I would say now, we talked about it briefly before in other episodes, but I would say we're at 2007 levels of the college football season. This has been an incredibly entertaining season. Probably not if you're a diehard fan of a team that just missed the playoffs. But nonetheless, if you're watching as a neutral or a smaller school, incredible football to watch throughout the season.
Yeah, it's been a really entertaining couple of weeks here as we've wound things down. All year has produced great football, but especially, I'll say the level of upsets and the quality of play. Even though we might be without some of the bigger names for these bowls, we've still seen pretty high quality play and some pretty entertaining matchups.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the regular season, as good as it was, and going into the bowl season with how bowls are these days, we were kind of a little bit worried about some of it. But I mean, they've kept the pace. We have seen some crazy bowl games already, and we still have the majority of the playoff left, and a good slate of bowl games today, tomorrow, and then a couple days into January.
Yeah, it should be really interesting the next few days here. Obviously, we've got the playoffs starting tonight, and then most of the games taking place tomorrow, having a full slate on New Year's Day. But we can't forget about those smaller bowls that are taking place after our quarterfinals here, like the Bahamas Bowl, kind of taking us right up to, I guess that's the fourth, right? January 4th.
To the fourth. Yep, to the fourth. So yeah, and before we hop into the games that are coming up, let's just briefly recap some of the ones that we've already touched on a bit. Like we said, crazy bowl games this year. I mean, great example: Christmas Eve, South Florida and San Jose State going. I believe it was a record 5 overtimes. Of course, now with the overtime rules, it's a little easier to get there, but still longest game by overtime standard in bowl season history. And then 2 days later, Pitt and Toledo break that record. Just crazy games. Seeing South Florida, they capped off a good season. As they're trying to move their way up in the American Conference. I had San Jose State there. I figured they could pull it off for a variety of reasons, but South Florida did look good there and deserved to win. And same could be said about the Pitt Toledo game. Pitt slid at the end of the season, still had a good game, but Toledo, they needed to show up and play, and they did, and they won a thriller.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice way for Toledo to cap their season off. They had that nice win over Mississippi State early in the season, but then a pretty disappointing show for them in the MAC. After they beat Mississippi State, people had kind of labeled them and Northern Illinois after their upset of Notre Dame, the two favorites in the MAC. And then neither of those teams wound up even playing for the conference championship. So, kind of just goes to show you how competitive and how we'll say topsy turvy a little bit things have been this season. And like you said, those two games were extremely entertaining, really good watches. I'm not sure how many people stayed up for the entirety of the Hawaii Bowl on the East Coast, but it was a really fun watch. And if you didn't have anything else to do on Christmas Eve after your family activities, a good way to kind of cap off your night.
Oh yeah, 100%. And just to touch on that Pittsburgh and Toledo game, I commented, even though I picked Pittsburgh to win that game, I commented how Toledo is a sneaky good team, despite their showing in conference play. And with how both teams ended the season, how you said, it's got to be great for Toledo going into the off season. I would think that they've got to be a dark horse for the MAC next season. Ohio still looks, quite solid as a returning champ. But I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Toledo's in that like top four picture in the conference.
Yeah, I can definitely see Toledo being one of those top end MAC teams next season. Um, the MAC is always one of those conferences that seems to keep us on the edge of our seats in terms of what's going to happen during the year. So who knows what the MAC will turn out to be next year? But I think you're right. Ohio should probably be in a pretty good position despite losing Tim Albin to Charlotte. And I think Miami of Ohio is going to be in a really good position as well. I want to say they've played in like the last three MAC championship games. So I'm sure they'll be sniffing around with Toledo and Ohio U.
Yeah, yeah, 100% there. Miami, great program right now. Solid bowl win as well against Colorado State. Yeah, they should likely also be in that picture. Moving on to the Armed Forces Bowl, we had Oklahoma versus Navy. I feel like a lot of people wrote this game off because Oklahoma versus Navy, and this ended up being a great game. And the midshipmen come out on top, and something that you would not really expect, but again, that kind of you know tips his hat to how this college football season has been.
Yeah, that was a heck of a game. Oklahoma got out to a little bit of a lead early, and then Navy really stormed its way back, made it competitive, and ultimately pulled out that victory, capping off a really nice season for the midshipmen. No, they did not win the AAC or beat Notre Dame like some people were hoping they might mid-year, but winning a game against an SEC team in your bowl and beating your arch rival Army is a really nice way for Navy football to finish this season and start moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Staying with the military theme, over in the Military Bowl, we had a state championship game basically with ECU versus NC State. Lots of recruiting implications on the line there, and ECU comes out on top. Kind of a disappointing year for. Oh, I just blanked on the coach's name. I believe it's Dorian, correct?
Yeah, Dave Doran.
Yeah, Doran. So yeah, very disappointing season in Raleigh for them. The Wolfpack just kind of struggled. I honestly forgot that they were even bowl eligible until I saw the matchup. And ECU, and again, one of those like sneaky mid-major programs where they have highs and lows, and they came into this game somewhat hot, and they won what they needed to win. So it really helps their recruiting matchup. Now, as you have Bill Belichick going into the state at UNC, you've got to think that they're top dogs. But App State's taking a step back, NC State taking a step back. Wake Forest is just kind of there, and we're not sure what Manny Diaz is going to do in uh, Duke yet. But it seems like they're in the right direction. So ECU all of a sudden could be looking at the second spot in the state now.
Yeah, that was a huge win for the Pirates. Like we said in our preview show of that game, that's actually a preview of both of those teams' opening game next season. So they'll run it back to start the year in August. But like you said, really nice end to the year for ECU. They were really, really struggling. They lost, I think it was by like 23 points or 17 points, something like that, to Army in the middle of the season. They fell to 3-4 and fired Mike Houston as their coach. After they fired Mike Houston, they didn't lose a game, or excuse me, they lost to Navy, but outside of the Navy game, they didn't lose again, and they finished with an 8-win season. So really got to give credit to ECU for battling. And like you said, they put themselves in a really nice position moving forward in the state of North Carolina. Who knows what that state's going to be in terms of where the teams kind of slate out. Duke had a really nice year this year. They got Darian Mensah out of the portal, so maybe they can follow that up. But are we really sure what Manny Diaz is going to be at Duke? I'm not 100% sure. So
Yeah, I mean, there's glimpses, but of course, we saw glimpses at Miami as well. So he's just going to have to show that with time that he can consistently produce a winning program there at Duke. Um, Now, moving on, our final recap game that we have slated, the Alamo Bowl, BYU, Colorado. You know, kind of the swan song for the that main group there under Coach Prime, and it was a dud for the Buffs. The Cougars just ran that whole game. Kind of a shock with the hype the Colorado team has had this season, and they have lived up to most of it. However, the stat lines that have come out following the game makes it a little bit of a blemish on the Buffs record, but nonetheless, great individuals in that program now going to the NFL. Sure, end of an era in Colorado, but I think Coach Prime will have it going to the future. But I mean, this BYU team had a great chance at the Big 12 championship until very late in the season with that loss at Arizona State. This was a great way to cap their year off.
yeah, and I think BYU wanted to prove to a lot of people with this game that their 10-2 record during the regular season wasn't some fluke or just a nice story, and that they were a really strong, really good football team. And they definitely did that by beating Colorado so convincingly. I think they were up 27-0 at one point in the third quarter. So it really was pretty big beatdown. And like you said, not the best way for Shadur and for Travis to go out. But all in all, I think Colorado fans would be extremely happy if you told them that they would turn their season around, pick up 9 wins this year. And I'm sure they're pretty confident about their future. How long Dion's going to stay, I don't know. Um, but it's looking good for Colorado. But BYU's in a great position. I'm sure they'll be competing for the Big 12 again next year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't know if Colorado has to worry much about Coach Prime leaving unless Mike Norvell gets fired. If he gets fired, I think that home might come a calling for
Hmm.
Coach Prime.
You
So
never know. You never know.
yeah, it's college football. You really never know. Moving into the games for today. Right now we're at halftime. Alabama versus Michigan. Michigan up 16-10. Oh, looks like they just kicked off the second half. Actually, I had Alabama here. Obviously, Michigan jumped out early. What are your second half thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I had Bama as well in my pregame projections or predictions, whatever you want to call them. I think the Tide are still going to get it done. If you look at how Michigan scored those touchdowns, a lot of them were off of Jalen Milroe turnovers, and Milroe seemed to kind of settle in a little bit and put together some solid drives to close out the second half. So I think DeBoer will kind of right the ship or has righted the ship during halftime, and they'll come out looking a little stronger and finish with I won't say convincing win, but finish with a win here in the formerly known as Outback Bowl.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup whenever you look at it. 7-5 Michigan team struggled. Really should have been 6-6 if Ohio State had a pulse in that final matchup. And then Alabama, first team out of the playoff. They're the number 11 team in the country, but due to automatic qualifiers, they obviously missed out. But a 9-3 team. They both teams met in the semifinal last year. You almost kind of wonder a little bit as well if Alabama's motivated for it. Certainly, they're the better team this year. But in 2024, 2025, the motivation for bowl games is a very, very large contributing factor to the outcome of these games. So I'm with you. I think Bama does end up winning this in the second half. But certainly it is much closer than you would think on paper. Moving on to the Tony the Tiger Bowl, that should be kicking off any moment now. That is Louisville versus Washington. I'm going to go ahead and take Huskies there, although they've had a hard time on the road. They went 6-0 at home and lost every road game, including neutral site matchups. I think this is the one that they do win. the one neutral site matchup being in Seattle at Lumen Field instead of at Husky against Washington State. But I don't know. I'm not sold on this Louisville team. They had glimpses, but so did Pittsburgh, and we see how Pittsburgh season ended. I think Washington does get it done. Just they got to build something there in Seattle. If they lose this one, I think there could be trouble for the Huskies moving forward. But what are your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. Louisville's not playing with their starting quarterback from this year, Tyler Shuck, and I think their top receiver, Ja'Cory Brooks, also opted out to prepare for the NFL draft. So that's two big pieces of offensive talent getting lost. And I don't know. I was kind of going back and forth on this one. I'm going to stick with my original gut feeling and pick the Cards. They had a really strong season. They played well against high quality opponents, but played down to some inferior opponents. So who knows? That might come back here. But I like what Braum has done since going back to Louisville. And I think they'll keep the train rolling and pick up some momentum heading into the off-season, portal season, um, with a win over the Huskies in the Tony the Tiger Bowl.
Okay, nice little split there for some New Year's Eve action. Moving to the battle of the cheesiest, South Carolina versus Illinois in the Cheez It Bowl. What are your opening thoughts there?
I think South Carolina is the more talented team in this scenario. Illinois has been a really nice story this year, not to take anything away from them. They played really well for Bielma and showed out really strongly. Um, but I think South Carolina's defense is just a different beast, different animal. I know they're not playing with Kennard, but I think these guys want to go out, win for Beamer, and 10 win seasons don't exactly come around like candy for Gamecock fans. So I think Beamer will be eager to bring one back to Columbia.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm not going to hide the bias, as I don't think I have at any point in this podcast, but I am big time a South Carolina homer. I do have them winning this game, but it's not just cause I do think that they are the better team. South Carolina historically has played very well in Orlando, and I think that they do match up decently well against Illinois. I do want to speak pretty positively with this Illinois team. Brett Bielema has done a great job rebuilding there. The former Arkansas skipper, he has done a solid job in Illinois. He has made them into a pretty formidable Big Ten program now, and I don't really see that letting up. I think that it's on a pretty steady trajectory, even with how deep that conference is. So I think both teams great seasons. I think South Carolina will get the cherry on top in this one and get the win. But hats off to Brett Bielema and the Fighting Illini this season. Great year. So going to the Texas Bowl, we have Baylor and LSU. This is kind of an interesting bowl to see LSU end up in, given all the preseason hype. Kind of figured they'd be one of those last in teams for the playoff, and fall from grace under Brian Kelly this season. What do you see there between the Bears and Tigers?
Yeah, I think Baylor's actually going to pull this one off. They've been one of the best offenses in the country down the stretch here with Sawyer Robertson playing some really, really good football for them. They started the season kind of shaky, going back to when they blew that Colorado game, and they were kind of hovering around 500 in that area or in that time frame. And then ever since they went and lost three in a row to Colorado, I want to say BYU is the middle game, and Iowa State, they haven't lost since. So this is a really hot football team. I think they're going to be one of the dark horse picks to win the Big 12 next year, just because of how explosive that offense has looked. And I like Baylor here to take care of LSU and that really weak defense.
Yeah, I sorry, I totally just blanked on on that. I was looking ahead at the playoffs as you were going. So I realized I had not made my picks for the playoffs. I wanted to do that before we got to that segment. Um, I either agree or disagree with everything you just said. I took Baylor.
Okay, so we agree.
Great. Yes, yeah, Pat, I 100% agree with your insight there. Unfortunately, I didn't have much prepared for Baylor LSU. I only had a lot of eye test games for them. Baylor coming earlier in the season, LSU kind of that middle, struggle part of the season for them. Um, you know, I wasn't like sold on LSU to start the season. I know the media liked them a lot. Baylor didn't really know what to expect, and then of the games that I saw of them, that was right. Didn't know what to expect. But kind of just going off of like a gut feeling here, I had to go with the Bears, just because I'm not confident in what Brian Kelly puts out on the field. Week in week out, you don't know what's going to show up. Um, Now moving in as we're locked into the Gator Bowl, Ole Miss versus Duke. Uh, the Fighting Lane Kiffins 4-0 in round one playoff games this season. Pretty unbelievable stuff on Twitter. Uh, but I think that they're going to get it done against Manny Diaz and the Blue Devils. Certainly not where they wanted to be. I think this is going to be a case of they're motivated and not that they just don't want to be there at all. I think that they are going to take Duke somewhat easily here. I'm thinking kind of like a 2-3 score game by the time it's all said and done. I just think Ole Miss is going to have enough firepower to overcome whatever might be coming at them from Duke. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Ole Miss is definitely going to win this game. Duke is playing their third string quarterback. Their starter, Malik Murphy, opted out pretty much right after the season ended and the portal opened. He's going to be at Oregon State next year. Their backup, Grayson Loftus, also opted out and entered the transfer portal. I'm not really sure where he wound up, but they're playing third stringer Henry Beelan against a really solid Ole Miss defense. And like you said, I don't think a whole large portion of Ole Miss fans would be super stoked if you told them after they spent all that money they're in the Gator Bowl. But let's not take away from the opportunity to cap off a really solid, if a little underwhelming season for the Rebels with a win over another P4 opponent in Duke. And I think Lane Kiffin, after all of his Twitter talking, has a little bit of an extra incentive to make sure his team looks good and finishes the season out strongly.
Very nice. Moving to the First Responder Bowl, now we're kind of in those feels random given the time of bowl season it is, but fun matchups nonetheless. This is North Texas versus Texas State. Two programs that are looking to take the step forward in Texas. I think that program is going to be Texas State. I'm very very impressed with where that program is going, given where they have been after making the jump. They're kind of turning into a perennial Sun Belt team there, which the Sun Belt is not what it used to be, 10 years ago. The additions of Georgia Southern, App State helped elevate it pretty quickly. And then now the play is just getting better and better every season. I think the Bobcats are going to look pretty good in this matchup. Believe North Texas is dealing with a good bit of opt-outs / transfer portal guys going into this. So I like the Bobcats here.
Yeah, I'm with you on riding with the Bobcats. GJ Kinney's done a really nice job with Texas State. Like you said, turning them into a really solid G5 program, making them one of those teams that's always in competition and hanging around in the Sun Belt year after year. North Texas had a pretty solid season. Chandler Morris played really well for them, but their defense is kind of non-existent. So unless they're scoring 40 plus points a game. They had their backs up against the wall a lot, and I think this Texas State defense is good enough to stop them um, a few times and not let them cross that 40-point threshold. So I've got the Bobcats as well.
Very nice. Going to the Duke's Mayo Bowl, kind of another bowl game that has the aura of the Pop Tarts Bowl, which actually this existed before the Pop Tarts Bowl.
It
So
did. It did.
you could say the Pop Tarts Bowl stole some of this gusto. But Minnesota versus Virginia Tech. Minnesota maybe not as much, but Virginia Tech at the start of the season, got to be disappointed with where you ended up. Lots of talk out of Hokie country that it was going to be a dark horse season for the playoff, perennial ACC contenders. Looking at that top spot to take on the Clemson's, the Miamis, and then almost immediately fell on their face against Vanderbilt and never really recovered from that loss. I mean, they've made it to the bowl game. They're facing a Minnesota team that definitely does not want to be here, but did not have the aspirations that Virginia Tech had going into the season. I think the Hokies take this, despite all of the letdowns from this past year. I just don't like what Minnesota can do man to man against Virginia Tech. I don't think the Gophers have quite the same weapons and physicality that the Hokies do. But don't get me wrong, this could very easily be an ugly game. It could be looking at a 24-21 ugly fest.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be an interesting, we'll say, matchup or back and forth here. Uh, I think that Minnesota is going to win this game. PJ Fleck's done a pretty solid job with Minnesota this year. They were a few plays away from beating Penn State up in Minneapolis to start the season. They had a chance to beat, actually, they might have beaten UNC. I
They
forget.
lost to UNC
They did lose, right?
and then shot fireworks off at the loss.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought happened. Because UNC hit that field goal to end things. Yeah, so they had a chance against two halfway decent teams. Obviously, UNC looked pretty bad against UConn in their bowl game, but I think Minnesota has a stronger team and has more incentive going into this bowl. I think this season's been, like you said, a big letdown for Virginia Tech football and their fans after they kind of expected to compete for an ACC crown or at least a outside chance at the playoffs, and then they just kind of did the same thing they've been doing the past few years and just almost started running in reverse and limped their way to a 6-6 finish. So give me the Gophers in the Mayo Bowl.
Okay. All right. And then our final non playoff matchup of this bowl season sees Buffalo versus Liberty in the Bahamas Bowl. Kind of a fitting spot. I like this bowl game being in January. I didn't like it necessarily in early December because it was just kind of like, felt like, bam, okay, Bahamas Bowl, here we go. Uh, I like this in January. It feels right. Kind of like the BBVA Compass Bowl from years ago.
mm, mm.
Just just feels like a great spot to have this game in. But as for the actual game, Buffalo being led here by a first year head coach, was it Lemby and
Lembo.
Lembo? Wow, that's really bad considering he was South Carolina last year. Um, Big Pete. There we go. Um, but yeah, I like the Bills in this matchup. They've done a great turnaround under him in the first year. I think that Buffalo's got a pretty bright future. Obviously, I don't think it's going to be as immediate as they'd like, but give it another year or two after that, and I could see them at the top of the MAC conference as long as they're able to keep Big Pete in office over there. Liberty being in this bowl game has got to be frustrated. I mean, they had the second best odds to be that Group of Five team going into the season behind Boise State, and just completely fell apart. It was a blanking on the matchup, but it was like a Thursday, Friday night game, and then that's just where the wheels fell off the bus for the Flames this season. And then just to land in the Bahamas Bowl. they've got to be scratching their heads there in Lynchburg, and I don't see. I mean, they're a better team than Buffalo, I think, talent wise, but I just don't see how they get up for this game. And I'm almost certain that they're dealing with opt outs here. So I like Buffalo to win this one.
Yeah, I like Buffalo as well. Liberty's definitely a confusing team. Like you said, a lot of people thought that they were going to be right there competing for that G5 bid, and then they come out and lose to Kennesaw State and Sam Houston. I mean, no disrespect to Sam Houston, they had a really nice season, but two teams that you didn't really think were going to do much of anything this year. Kennesaw State definitely did not. Um, where Buffalo was pretty much the opposite. They're a team that came in with little to no expectations this year and wound up winning 8 games. They kind of competed for a chance in the MAC title game right up until the last 2 weeks of the season. So I think they're going to finish off their season strongly, have a way to move forward into that wide open conference that is the MAC next season, and yeah, get 9 wins for Pete Lembo in his first year in charge there.
Yeah, 9 wins would be big in Buffalo. So now moving to essentially the main event of any college football show these days. We have the quarterfinal matchups. Tonight, we have Penn State versus Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. Boise State, in kind of that southern home stadium, if you will, given their history in the Fiesta Bowl. Penn State coming into this game red hot. Pat, what are your opening thoughts here?
This is a tough one, I think, because I want to pick Boise State. I want to say that the dream season continues, but Penn State has looked really, really good this season, and the knock on Penn State under James Franklin has never been that they're a quote unquote bad team or even a mediocre team, right? Penn State's always been or consistently been a top 10 to 8 team in the country under Franklin. It's just a matter of beating a top 5 team, which he can't seem to really do. So yeah, I think my answer there kind of gave it away. Final decision. I'm going with Penn State to take care of business tonight in the Fiesta Bowl. Although I certainly would not be disappointed at all if Boise State wins that game.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I'm really hoping that Boise State wins this game, but I just think that Penn State is a bit too much. I think this is a great path for James Franklin. I didn't really know what SMU team was going to show up. I thought that was going to be a much closer game, if not an upset. I still did pick Penn State to win that game in Happy Valley, but winning the game the way that they did, then getting this matchup, you know, then they're getting some high profile wins after looking pretty good against Oregon in the conference championship game there. Penn State really ended their season strong. I think that they get the win here. I think that they have the ability to move forward into the semis with a good bit of momentum. But of course, we got to see how this game goes before I start crowning them the national champion. Moving over to the Peach Bowl on January 1st, we have Texas versus Arizona State. I originally said that this game I think could produce a dark horse
You did. You
uh,
did say that.
run. I mean, I think that whoever wins this game, based on the matchup, is going to be set pretty well. I think these two teams match up decently well with each other. I do think that Texas has better athletes than Arizona State. Um, but call me foolish. I like the Sun Devils here.
Oh wow.
I mean, sure, it's probably a Cinderella pick. Well, it is a Cinderella pick, but if the shoe fits, I think the Sun Devils have a chance here um, to make a little magic happen and make a little bit of a run. So, Sun Devils for me in Atlanta.
I do not share your optimism for the Sun Devils there. I think they're a really good team. I think they've had a fantastic season. What Kenny Dillingham, excuse me, is building there should be celebrated. But ultimately, I just don't think they have enough to beat a team like Texas. I think Texas is going to go out there with a chip on their shoulder after how the SEC championship ended, and seeing that opportunity to get that first round bye kind of slip away. We saw them play really, really well, really physically against Clemson on the 21st. So I like the Longhorns here.
All right, nice little split there. I hear what you're saying. I do think the game is very easily going or could go that direction. But something's got me going Arizona State. But that something also had me switch my pick. Well, not switch my pick officially. I still had Notre Dame, but I was like, oh, look out for this Indiana team morning of, and they didn't hear me. So. Um, anyway, we're going to jump over to the Sugar Bowl. That is going to be Notre Dame versus Georgia. Carson Beck announcing that he is going to the NFL draft following his surgery. That puts Gunnar Stockton at the helm. Gunnar looked pretty good in the SEC championship game. I I have said that I think he's the reason they won that. Had Carson Beck stayed in the game with how he looked, they probably would have lost. Um, but yeah, the playoff is a whole different beast than just one half of a game. And they're going to have two games after this as well of Gunnar Stockton, and you have a red hot Notre Dame team to face off against. What are your thoughts here against the Irish and Dogs?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good game. Obviously, these two teams have had really strong seasons. I don't, I don't know if I'm extremely excited that Gunnar Stockton's the one playing. If I'm a Georgia fan, we kind of felt like this is what was going to be the case for a few weeks now after the SEC championship. But like you said, official this week. Carson Beck had his surgery, has declared for the NFL draft. I don't know. He played well against Texas, but there really wasn't any tape out there on him, right? Showing how he progresses through his reads when he decides to pull it and scramble a little bit like he did against the Longhorns. So I think Notre Dame will have some more information, be able to better prepare for that. I think what's going to decide this game is the line of scrimmage. Notre Dame's down their biggest defensive lineman, who's 6'6", like 300 pounds. The rest of their D linemen are in the 6'2", 6'1" range, 280 to 290. So it's not exactly a really, really massive defensive line. So I think that'll be the thing to watch, seeing if they struggle to control the line of scrimmage, and if that allows Georgia to kind of wear them down a little bit. That being said, I still like the Irish in this game. I think Notre Dame has a really good path to the playoff, especially if they win this game. Um, well, not playoff, excuse me, national championship. Um, if they win this game, and let's say Penn State wins, or even if Boise wins, I like them over that matchup as well. So I think whoever wins this game has the inside track to the national championship coming out of that semifinal matchup. And like I said, I like the Irish, and I think they're going to win by, I'll say 10 plus.
10 plus. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
I,
going bold.
I am very confident in Notre Dame here. I like them a lot. Georgia, which this is a comparison, so bear with me here. Georgia is just a better version of LSU this year. I don't know what team's going to show up. They've been highly inconsistent. They've looked great at some moments. They've looked like the Georgia we kind of expect them to be, and then they turn around the next week and they look like a middle of the road uh, SEC team. And it's like, well, you can't compete with putting that product on the field like at any given moment. Having a backup quarterback start his first career game in a quarterfinal is going to really test him. I think, building for the future's sake, it's a great spot for him. However, for the right here, right now, this is not great for Georgia. I think it's going to be a very physical game. I like Notre Dame a lot. I'm almost certain they win this, but I think it's going to be a one-score game. You know, I think the biggest margin of victory will be 7. I think you're probably looking at a 20-17 style game.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a really close game, really physical game. Um, but I don't know. Like I said, I really like Notre Dame, and I've said it in previous podcasts that we've done. This feels like a different team under Freeman than it did under Kelly. The thing under Kelly was every time they came up against one of these teams, these top level SEC talents or ACC talents, they just couldn't get over that hump. So
That is true. That is the biggest difference because you have an undefeated team going against undefeated Notre Dame team rather going against Alabama, and they're not playing on the same field. And now Notre Dame is much more physical under Freeman. I feel like they match up better speed wise as well. So completely different Irish team. So yeah, no, I'm with you. Really like them right now, how they're built, and yeah, as long as they can stay healthy in this matchup, they've got a pretty good shot against whoever comes out of the Fiesta Bowl. But of course, you still have to play the game. So we'll move to the final quarterfinal matchup, the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl, Ohio State versus Oregon. Traditionally, a normal Rose Bowl matchup, Big Ten versus Pac 12. Now, this is a Big Ten rematch of the game from Eugene earlier in the season. Ohio State coming in after beating Tennessee at home, really looked good in that matchup. Oregon, rather, the only undefeated team in the country. What do you like between the Buckeyes and the Ducks?
yeah, I think this is going to be a great game. I think this is probably going to be the best semifinal that we see. Hopefully, it's even remotely close to that game up in Eugene from earlier this year. I don't know. I've been going back and forth on this one. If you had asked me 2 weeks ago who I was taking, I think I would have emphatically said Oregon. But Ohio State looked really, really, really good against Tennessee. I don't want to let recency bias sway me too much, though. So I'm going to stick with the Ducks to continue their undefeated season and run towards a national championship.
All right, yeah, I can't remember if I've said it on the podcast or if I've just said it in general. Um, you know, Before the matchup against Tennessee for Ohio State, I thought the winner of that game would come just to get fed to Oregon. I figured it would just be an ugly matchup. Game would be over at kickoff. Now, I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think Ohio State's got a good bit of momentum now. They really needed the win the way that they got it. Um, and Ohio State, very used to the Rose Bowl game, used to that atmosphere. I think that plays to their advantage. Obviously, Oregon, very good team as well. They've been to a couple recently. But I like the Buckeyes to keep it close. But I think the Ducks are just too good this season. They've been so consistent, week in, week out. I like Oregon. They're still my favorite to win the championship for good reason. But I got the Ducks. I think we'll see some points here. But probably looking at a one-score game. But I think the Ducks are taking this one and continuing their march toward the national title. So, as we wrap up the show today, I'm going to hit you with one final question. Before our quarterfinal matchups, who are you crowning the national championship today?
Oh, man, that's a tough question. Um, you know, I said during our preview of the Sugar Bowl, I think the winner of Notre Dame, Georgia has the inside track to make the national championship. I'll take it a step further. Not only do they have the inside track to make the national championship, I think they have the inside track to win the national championship. So I'm going to go out on a limb here. They've let me down plenty of times before, but hopefully this time's different. Give me the Irish to win their first natty since 1988.
All right. I like that. I like that pick. I'm going to come at this at a much more broad attack. Obviously, I've said that the winner of the Texas Arizona State game is my dark horse pick. Um, since I have Arizona State winning that game, they kind of get that slot. I don't think it's going to be enough to ultimately get them there. So they're going to be third on my podium. So then it leads me to then Oregon and Notre Dame. Um, sorry, Penn State and Boise. Sorry. Notre Dame, they've been great week in, week out. Following that Northern Illinois game, I wrote them off immediately. I thought that would just be it for them. They would kind of fall into 8-4, 9-3 obscurity and just kind of be a classic Notre Dame team of the modern era. But no, they completely flipped the script on me and have gotten better each week, matchup by matchup, and looked good doing it. Oregon, only undefeated team in the country. Their resume kind of speaks for itself. I've been very high on them, but I'm throwing a curveball right now. I don't think they win the national championship. I think that them being undefeated is a bit of a detriment to them. You kind of got to taste defeat sometimes, and with how this playoff is, having that loss kind of can help you. You feel it once, you hate it, you never want to get back there. And this Oregon team probably feels a little bit untouchable with how good that they've been throughout the season. Losing just doesn't exist to them. So I think that they will match up with Notre Dame in that championship game. And Notre Dame's loss to Northern Illinois, I think, might be the deciding factor because that's really driven them to get better week in, week out at a rate that, we haven't really seen from other teams. So I middle of the season, never thought I'd say this, but I'm going to take the Irish to win the national
Wow.
championship as a kind of a over exaggerated pick today. We will revisit this in about a week and see
Yeah,
what happens.
this could age like milk come 12 a.m. on
So
Monday or Sunday.
yeah, this could be this could be an all-time horrible ending to a podcast, or this could, Nostradamus. So we'll have to see. But both of us going with the Irish, that wasn't what I expected, but that's how we are ending 2024 as our over-exaggerated pick for the national champions. So, any final words from you today, Pat?
I think the last thing I'll say is, like we kind of said before our preview, these are going to be some really entertaining games. So hopefully, if you guys have the chance over the next few days, you can lock in, watch these football games, especially the college football playoff. I don't think any of those games are going to be complete and total blowouts. Um, so hopefully, we get some good football down the stretch here. And I don't know, I'm excited to see come Sunday where we stand in terms of our bigger bowls being done and our playoff picture looking a whole lot clearer.
Yeah, for sure. I cannot wait. Well, that is a wrap on our 2024. For Pat, I'm TJ at 626 Productions. Happy New Year's, everybody.